Higher ed is facing headwinds like never before. And with internal teams leaner than ever, you need outside help that knows what you do and can plug into your operations to help in any way you need. From enrollment analysis and support, to bold, brand-driven creative and elite user-focused strategies, Electric Kite can help. So yeah, it's getting windy out there. But that's okay, because kites rise against the wind. Visit electrickite.com to learn more.
Hello, and welcome to the Trusted Voices podcast. I'm Erin Hennessy, alongside Teresa Valerio Parrot, and in each episode, we discuss the latest news and biggest issues facing higher ed leaders through a communications lens. For these conversations, we'll be joined by a guest who will share their own experiences and perspectives.
Hi, Erin. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
It's really early here where I am.
Yeah, we're coming on lunch over here, and I'm very excited about it.
Okay.
One of my 3 favorite meals.
Well, Allie has first breakfast and second breakfast, so I would say it's
Yeah.
one of her 4 favorite meals.
I don't have that kind of time in my life. So how are things in higher education? Good?
A little bit doom and gloom, but that's okay. This weekend, I was at AERA, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I was able to catch up with Michael Harris, who didn't realize when he said that he had an afternoon that I was going to take up like 10 hours of his day. And we were able to talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry. And he said, I need to buy Capitalizing on College, How Higher Education Went from Mission-Driven to Margin-Obsessed. So we'll put that in the show notes. And I think we're going to do a book club. So let us know if you'd like to join.
Do you want to tell people who Michael Harris is? I mean, everyone should know who Michael Harris is.
So Michael Harris is professor, soon to be interim dean at SMU of Education. He was one of the reasons I started my doctoral degree at SMU. He studies presidents in higher ed. He was on my dissertation committee. He has become a very close colleague, and he is one of 2 authors I am working on a book with for Harvard Education Press on presidents and boards. So,
safe to say he's a friend of the show and one of the earliest friends of the show.
Yes. And he is a very, very smart dude who makes me think about higher education, still very much in that mentoring professorial role. So basically, when I say we're having a book club, I better get my poop in a group to be ready for Professor Harris to be quizzing me on the ins and outs of this book.
All right. Well, I'm going to order it, but I'm not going to tell him then. So, books. Don't
so
read
there
them.
we go. So I was
Don't
at
read them.
AERA, and it was really fun to see him. I also saw Sandra Berenger, who was my dissertation chair. We had dinner. It was really nice to catch up with some higher ed peeps and just to talk about a whole bunch of things and spend some time because the conference was in my town.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. The reason we were talking about margins is because I was sharing with Michael that this year, the AMA symposium theme is revenue and reputation. So he was asking a little bit about the pressures that we're seeing in the industry, and I was filling him in on that. So there you go.
Are there pressures in the industry?
Yes, they are tied to reputation and revenue.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's excellent. I went to a lot of travel team baseball this weekend and didn't do anything higher ed related, really. So,
well, good luck to your nephew, Jack. I hope that he has lots of success.
Oh, yeah. It'd just be great if these games were a little shorter. The pitch clock is a great invention, and it should be applied to travel baseball. You have a couple other things you wanted to mention. We're intentionally keeping this front piece a little bit shorter because we have a great guest coming up, and we kept him longer than we probably should have, longer than his team wanted us to, maybe.
Yes.
So we want to get to that conversation pretty quickly.
Yes. The second piece I wanted to share is that after our last podcast, as you all heard, I had a lot of energy about the fight for higher ed. And so I chatted with you after, and I said, you know what we should do? We should have, the cheer mom and me came out, and I said, we should have a fundraiser. And if we're going to have a fundraiser for higher ed.
Cars in the funeral home parking lot.
No, we were not going to do that. I said, we should do a merch sale. And so I talked to Savannah of Parrot Like the Bird, And I had her come up with 4 designs for some merchandise that say "Fight for Higher Ed." And all proceeds from our little merch sale are going to go to Pen America to support the ability to have freedom of speech and academic freedom and support pushback on book bans. So thank you for the introduction to that nonprofit.
Absolutely.
We will have a link in our show notes for our merch sale for Fight for Higher Ed. Our 4 designs go from, how would you describe them?
I would say look at the 4 designs and
Yes.
decide which I advocated for and which Teresa advocated for,
Some are
and then tell
more
us your guesses.
formal, some are more informal. So it won't be surprising the president is selling best, followed by, I think, maybe the dean, and the chair is not selling as well.
This is what
So
we have named these
yeah, the
designs, not
provost is kind of in the middle, but the president is
so often the provost is in the
by
middle, yeah?
far, yes, by far selling best.
Interesting.
Yes. So I think yours was the provost.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Quiet behind the scenes, doing the hard
No,
work,
yeah, but we all
not
knew
flashy.
the president was the one we knew would sell the best because it's kind of straightforward. But Fight for Higher Ed is the push. All of them have accents of purple, and that was intentional. It's the overlap of red and blue, so we're right in
It's
the middle.
the TVP comms color
Well, that was
as
the
well.
rationale for TVP comms too.
Mm,
We're in the middle.
we just like purple.
In our creative brief, that was the rationale. And we'll also put a link to kind of why we chose to do this, because we want to support higher ed as well. So do you want to give a little shout out to Pen America and why that was your recommendation for the nonprofit that gets the proceeds?
Sure. Pen America has partnered with ACE on a push to protect academic freedom. They're essentially an organization that allows people and supports people writing, teaching, and reading about whatever they damn well please. And certainly their focus on book bans is something near and dear to my heart as a
Mm-hmm.
voracious reader and someone for whom reading truly has changed my life. And so it seemed like a very straightforward, very easy way to support higher education. The truth is, there's so many good organizations
Yes.
supporting higher ed, but this one seemed to really get at the heart of what we value and care about most, and what seems at the core to be the focus of attacks from outside actors. Ooh, that sounds very like spy novelty. But yeah, that's PEN America's always been a phenomenal organization, and it's a thrill to be able to support them.
So help us fight for higher ed. And that actually was the perfect segue to our guest today. Ted Mitchell has served as president of the American Council on Education since September 2017. Mitchell and his team worked closely with Congress, the executive branch, and the private sector to develop policies and innovative practices that serve our country's post secondary learners. Mitchell served in the Obama administration as U.S. Undersecretary of Education, as president of Occidental College, vice chancellor and dean at the University of California, Los Angeles, professor and department chair at Dartmouth College, and a member of the Stanford University Board of Trustees. Thank you for joining us, Ted. I'd love for us to begin with something today for an insider's view from you about what's going on with executive orders, court filings, Department of Education energy, and all around DC energy. What are you hearing?
Dumpster fire.
Well, that's what it feels like from Colorado, just so that you know.
That's why
Well,
it's so warm.
yeah, exactly. Up close, and especially in the evenings, there's this delightful glow you can mistake for the seasons changing. It's never been like this before. The amount of tumult and chaos and information and misinformation, it's really quite extraordinary. The big takeaway for ACE and for our members is that it's very, very hard to do anything that looks like planning.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only do you not know what tomorrow holds, you don't know what yesterday held.
Right.
That's
And
such a good point.
And we talk to our presidents about this all of the time. We get caught in chasing our tails for the day, and the next day, everything has changed, and we're chasing our tails for that day. And then
Yes.
everything changes.
Yeah. And half the time it feels like somebody moved your tail and you're not entirely sure
Right,
where it
right. You
is.
first is, where is my tail? Where did I leave
Yeah.
Do
that?
I have a tail?
Do I still have one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I think there are all kinds of things people can do and not do, but I do think that saying, don't just sit there, do something. Uh,
Oh, that's my saying.
but I
Oh, go ahead.
think I think we should reverse it for a while. Don't just do something, sit there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what Erin is advocating.
Well, we've learned a lot, right? I think that we all worked hard to respond to the executive orders. We continue to work hard, and I think substantively, on some of the agency changes and cuts. And we'll talk, I know, about research in a bit. But aside from that, I think that what we've learned is that this stuff always sounds more dire than it ends up being.
Mhm.
And so we should just kind of take the blow, wait for it to settle, and figure out where one can actually plan a little bit for some activity.
Well, and we've talked about that. Yeah, because so many institutions that have jumped have overinterpreted and they've read into some of the language what wasn't there. It's purposely been gray. And so when they read into it, they're imagining what it could have been and they're going further maybe than what was even there. And I would guess that there's somebody somewhere who's smiling and saying, "Thank you for taking this further than I even dreamed it could have gone."
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think that we warned people in February that preemptive compliance was an objective of all of this stuff, and that that people really shouldn't imagine that they were going to have to do all of these things. Now, the caveat is, if you're doing things that were illegal before inauguration, they were still illegal.
Right. Right.
But if you weren't, there was nothing that had changed in the law. So sit tight. Let's worry about this when there's actually something to worry about.
One of the things that is just so destabilizing for higher ed, and I'm sure for the association world as well, is that we are an industry that really runs and functions really well when things are predictable, consistent, that there are norms that we all adhere to, that there are calendars. There's a
Or
reason
the
that many of us went to college, left college, and said, this sort of rhythm is really attractive and I want to continue to work in this space. And it's just not where we are. And I wonder just how you're thinking about if there was anything we could have done short of preemptive compliance to sort of be more ready for this moment. Is this the natural outgrowth of, and Teresa and I talk about this all the time, ballrooms full of presidents saying, well, it's just a storytelling problem. Were we so busy worrying about the storytelling problem that we weren't preparing to be a little more resilient or responsive to what in some cases are legitimate critiques of the industry?
Yeah, I think it's a really good framing, and I think I'll use my own experience as an example. I've been at ACE now for 7.5 years, which
Wow.
seems remarkable. I know.
Time's
Seems like
flying and
yeah, it
also
seems like
going so slowly.
it seems like just yesterday that I was doing my final interview with the ACE board, and they asked me what the number one priority for ACE should be, and I said addressing the negative narrative about higher education. Right,
Yeah.
right. So we've been here for a while, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that for too long we did believe that if we just spoke more slowly and more clearly,
Yes.
people would say, "Oh, how silly of me! Of course,
Yeah.
higher education is great."
The problem was with the receiver of the message, not
Right. Right.
the substance
Not
of
the
our
substance of
message.
it.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward. I think that we might have been taken by surprise by Mr. Trump, but what we were really taken by surprise by was last spring's protests.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
A-
agree.
and I think that that's really where we learned we were behind.
I think in part because what the feedback that we got from those protests is that our own people were upset with us. It wasn't just that they were upset with us, but our own community was upset with us. And we didn't know what to do with that.
That's right. And the upset reinforced what others were saying about us outside.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
And so you had very, very peculiar and problematic things, and anti-Semitism continues to be an issue. But you had people in the DEI offices of institutions saying Jews aren't a part of that.
Mm.
And if that's where we were as an institution, is it any wonder that we're being pilloried for anti-Semitism?
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of thing where I think that the regularity and the predictability, on the one hand, it looks like it's linear and it's the same. But I think looking back, I think there was a drift.
Mhm.
Right.
And so what looked like it was business as usual, we got called on that. And we
Yeah.
said, oh, business as usual isn't even what we thought business as usual was. We're not inclusive campuses. We
Yeah.
have terrible completion rates.
Mhm.
People can't transfer classes. Faculty are drifting way left. And so it's become more about advocacy than it has been about critical thinking. Full
Mhm.
stop. And that's
Yeah.
that's where we are today. And I think there is growing recognition that we need to address those issues. Good. There are changes afoot. Great. And there's an administration that sort of doesn't care. That
Yeah.
that for
Yeah.
them, this is about punishment. It's about retribution. It's about past ills. It's really hard in that environment to sort of come up with what's the settlement. What can
Right.
we do to prove that we're taking this seriously? And what will you do to take your boot off our neck?
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons I think that I really appreciated how Harvard reshaped its website. Because what they did is they decided, okay, we're going to go ahead to this messaging issue, right? We are going to reshape our website so that our audience is the public in a different way. It used to be, how do we tell people what we want them to know about us in a way that is a teachable lesson? We're not making this accessible, but instead, what do we want them to know so that they enroll or that they give or that they think about us in the ways we want them to know about us? And instead, they shifted that to say, what does higher education mean to you? What does research, how has it impacted your life for the better? And can we introduce the faculty to you as human beings who are part of your community? And I think that type of meeting people where they want to engage with higher education or could engage with higher education, I thought that was a really smart move, and I'm seeing more movement in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think that the idea of moving the narrative to answer the question, "What's in it for me?" is
Right,
really important.
exactly. That's exactly
Mhm.
it.
And so, what's in it for you, as you know, around the kitchen table, is that the food that you eat is
Mhm.
Right,
actually healthier and better for you because of all of the great work that our agronomists are doing.
right.
We were talking earlier about allergy medicines. Is that season?
Mhm.
Where'd those come from? It's not like somebody just snapped their fingers and came up with Zyrtec.
Right.
Biomedical research is really important.
And bless those researchers.
And bless those researchers, especially when you're bringing your handkerchief to your face every minute. So I had the occasion to drive across the country 3 weeks ago. Kansas. You talk about Harvard's website. The state of Kansas and the University of Kansas has created billboards across the state that are highlighting research done in Kansas in that county that I'm driving through.
That's great.
And so I think that we're kind of getting it. We're kind of getting it. Can I riff for a second
Yeah,
about the
that's what we're
problem?
here for. Go for it.
No,
So
absolutely
okay,
no riffing.
Go for it. I'm here
so
for
let's
it.
so let's take that. So I was talking with the president of Southern University from Louisiana
Yes.
the other morning, and so he said, look, when people in the rural communities outside of Baton Rouge think about us, they think about our mobile dental clinic
Mhm.
and our mobile medical clinic. Great, good, check, just what we want. The NIH grant cuts, what did they cut?
Yep.
The mobile dental and medical clinic. So we're in a situation where we can't play our best cards because they're being taken out of our hands.
Mm.
And not only is that bad for higher education, but it's bad for the people who need those services. So, one of my arguments with the Trump administration is that they seem to be dead set on punishing institutions, but they're not. They're holding research hostage and they're punishing people who need the benefits of that research.
And all of us need to be telling that story in each of our communities for where it impacts people in their own homes
That's
and in their
exactly
own
right.
businesses, and
That's
therefore
exactly.
in their own pocketbooks and with their own families.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it sounds awful, but I think that in addition to telling the story about the way our researchers and the teaching and the the cultural contributions to communities and in the ways that that answers the what's in it for me question,
Right.
we also need to flip that, and we need to be better about showing pain, showing the things that are actually happening to our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, so that and to bring that part of it home too.
Ted, I'm going to throw a question out, and it's just coming out of the conversation. So I agree with everything you've just said, and it's a point we make often. But the thing I keep coming back to is there a chance to make a difference to move the Trump administration? You just said that the point you make to the Trump administration is what does that conversation look like? When I was at ACE, you know, the GR team had great relationships regardless of party. Is there even an opportunity now beyond letters and sign on statements? Are you in active conversation with Secretary McMahon and other people in the department? Is there a hope in your heart to move the needle, talking about mobile dental clinics or any of those other kinds of things? I guess that's sort of
Yeah,
the question that sticks in my head.
yeah. So you both know me well enough to know that I'm an optimist, and so I do have hope that we'll be able to get through this moment and get to a moment where we're actually talking about what we can do for America's families, America's students. Right after the election, right after Secretary McMahon was named, I sent her a congratulations letter, but also talked about her appointment publicly and saying that I thought that there was going to be an interesting moment where the administration was going to need to choose between serious policymaking and following up on that overheated campaign rhetoric. And
Mhm.
I'm afraid that they continue to live in that overheated campaign rhetoric space.
Yeah.
But I have incredible hope that we'll be able to move to policymaking. We don't have direct communication with the secretary yet. I have a request out for a meeting with her, and I hope that that happens. We have an agenda that we think is actually quite close to hers in many ways. We're big supporters of, I think, what we're calling workforce Pell now.
Mhm.
We know that higher education as a whole needs to be much more closely linked to the world of work.
Mhm.
We're total supporters of public transparency about outcomes. As
Mhm.
you know, we just put out the new Carnegie classifications
Yes.
that, for the first
Congratulations.
time, hold institutions accountable for student success, and that's everybody. You know, we now have a sort of a spot on a graph for every institution in the country, and we can talk about access and we can talk about earnings. So we're all in on a lot of the things that I think the Trump administration and other administrations are after. And
Mhm.
to your broader point, you know, we want to work with people to create positive outcomes, but you know, we also need to support higher education as an industry. And you know, I think a lot of our return rhetoric has been about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yep. And I'm gonna ask this, not in a Pollyanna kinda way, but what's the thing that gives you hope that we will eventually move to policy? Do you think they'll just run out of energy, run out of steam with the overheated rhetoric?
A couple things. I think that a lot of these fires will burn themselves out,
Mm,
and that's one. Two, I think that as we were talking about a moment ago, a lot of the activity that is sort of cutting research funding now in the budget reconciliation bill that will reduce financial aid opportunities.
yeah.
I think that each of those creates another pain point for constituents and members of Congress,
Mhm.
and they're going to start to hear from them. And I think that that is going to drive us back into thinking about serious policy very, very,
Okay.
very quickly.
You're on the record.
Student deportations, suspended research grants, penalizations for DEI initiatives, and that's just this week. These and a whole raft of other legal questions and challenges are redefining higher education every day. That's where our new podcast, Campus Docket, comes in. I'm Scott Schneider. an attorney, an adjunct professor at the University of Texas School of Law. And in every episode of Campus Docket, I'll be joined by Eric Kelderman, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education, to break down the latest legal issues that higher ed leaders need to know about, from slash funding to rules regarding NIL and student athletics and everything in between. Tune into Campus Docket, part of the Volt Podcast Network, as we help you navigate higher ed's thorny legal issues.
I'm going to shift us a bit because I think we're seeing that presidents are damned if they do and they damned if they don't on multiple fronts. We've been talking about the federal front, but you're a former president, and we're seeing that presidents are in this near impossible position of having the faculty say, we would like for you to advocate for us on XYZ, and state legislatures, and this is for public and private institutions, are saying, we want for you to push back on exactly those same positions. So if you go back to when you were a president, what advice would you be giving for those damned presidents to be working through where they see themselves on that state level as well as on that federal level for this damning?
Yeah, it really is the Scylla and Charybdis of the college presidency
Right.
right now. I guess the first thing that I'll say is the strength of American higher education is the diversity of our institutions, which means that every president has a different situation.
Right.
And so one size will not fit all. One set of recommendations won't fit all. I think the most important thing is clarity and consistency, or things are clarity and consistency. If you're not going to sign a letter, say why you're not going to sign a letter. And if you're not going to sign that letter, don't sign the next letter.
Right.
And I think that that's where presidents really get in trouble, is when they allow themselves to be whipsawed back and forth and answer one constituency's demands and not another, and then they're seen as playing favorites, and that doesn't work. But in general, I think the other thing is that it's you use the phrase teachable moment. I think that it's a teachable moment for presidents too. I know that Sian Balak from Dartmouth wrote a long letter explaining why she didn't sign a letter. And I think it was really important for her to do that because it laid out her reasoning and her logic. And a part of what I think we need to educate our students and activists about is that there's a difference between having a cause and having an effect.
Yes.
And it's a little easy to have a cause, and it can be performative, but that may not lead you to the effect that you want to have.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And I
Yes.
think that that's a conversation that presidents ought to have, not just with their students, but with their faculties, about what do you want to have happen in the world,
Yes.
and what's the right way to make that happen. And I
And
think
those
that
are uncomfortable conversations.
they
My
are
presidents that I've been
huge,
able to encourage to have those conversations,
hugely
they're
uncomfortable.
tough, but you actually build more trust and you build more empathy with those constituencies long term.
I think that that's right. And I think what's important is to say not this but that, and then to hold yourself as the president accountable for doing the but that part.
Right.
So I'm not going to sign the letter, but I am going to do this other thing over here.
And that's
And
not a no, that's a not this, but that.
yeah,
Correct.
exactly. But it's a tough spot. I've watched presidential inaugurations being disturbed by protesters, and it's like, really, what's that going to get you? I think that there continues to be a mismatch between cause and effect that would be good to have as a part of a dialogue about what it means to be, how it means to change public opinion, how it means to change policy. We need to develop that muscle outside of just performative protest.
You raised such an interesting point there and said what seems to be the magic word lately, which is letter. AAC got a lot of signatories on a letter and got a lot of media attention for it. I think we're about to enter a season where we're going to see 1,000 letters bloom. And I think on some level, what that points to and what the presidential inauguration protest points to, or the commencement protest, is that people feel like they don't have any other real mechanisms to make that change and to engage in pushback. And higher ed, God love us, has never been great about coming together because we are so diverse,
Mhm.
and saying this is the the higher ed position. And, ACE has attempted to play that role of convener and has done it very well. But at the same time, is that enough? And I know you've talked about being in a season of lawsuits and other kinds of pushback. What things can individual institutions really harness at this point in time beyond just, I saw an interview with Sheryl Crow yesterday where she says, I call my members of Congress every morning, every single morning. Other than all of us downloading the Five Calls app and dialing up the members of Congress, what can institutions and what can their students and faculty do that can be more effective than some of the performative stuff?
Yeah. So first, I know I've been hard on letters, and I'm probably guilty of sending more than any other human being in Washington.
There's a lot of things to write about lately.
There's a
And
lot of
keep
things to
that
write about.
postal service going.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
well, I do joke with our team that with the advent of AI, we could now create letters, and then our friends in Congress could respond without there ever being any humans involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not going to go that far. I think that letters are good for identifying like-minded individuals.
Mm,
But then the next step is, how can you take that? So the letter that continues to circulate is drawing together people who have raised their hands and who have said, we agree on these principles.
right.
So then the next step is, how do you bring those individuals together and say the letter was just a signal? Now, what can we do?
Right. The so what of it.
The so what of it? And I think one of the things, and we've been looking at the signatories quite closely. There are regions in which the letter has been quite popular.
Mm,
And so maybe there's an institution in that region that can take the lead and convene those institutions and say, who are, for example, the members of our state legislature? Who are the members, the congressional members? How can we reach out to them together? And to the point that we were on earlier, how can we convince them that the work that we're doing matters to them? How can we answer the
right.
so what? And on the flip side, how can we say to them, look, this institution in your district is suffering and the people in your district are suffering? But to just start to do that, I think this has to be bottom up, not top down.
Right.
And that's one of the places I would move. I think the other place that that I think is quite important is for institutions to make individual connections with their lawmakers. And it's something that we always say, yeah, we're going to invite so and so and blah 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 blah. But
Right.
turns out to be really really important. I was in East Carolina a couple weeks ago, and they had just achieved the R1 status, and they were very careful to invite members of the legislature, both the state and the federal legislature, and it was great for them to be able to see this work firsthand. And
Yeah.
I don't think you can beat that. That sounds very pedestrian, but I think we've neglected that for too long, and we have, to your point about we kind of go along.
Right.
I think we just expect everybody to have good feelings about us, and that's just not true anymore.
Yeah, and it's always easier to make an enemy of something and someone that you don't know and don't have personal engagement with.
Right. And there's a lot, there's so much social science research that says that people are willing to castigate groups like public schools are awful.
Right.
Right.
But mine's great.
But mine is great. And you touch my public school and I'm going to cut your arm off. Right. And we need to make that work for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I also think that we've forgotten to make connections and relationships. And so many people have changed in so many industries, and we talk about this all of the time. And yet, when we're in situations like we're in right now, when we go to reach back out to these different offices and organizations, we realize all of the staff have changed. We're forgetting to maintain those connections and those LinkedIn connections and all of the different ways that we used to meet with people, whether it was with coffee or lunch. And so we still need to maintain who's where and what our connections are so that when we need them, they matter.
Yeah, when I was, and this is not to say that I did it right, but when I was at Occidental, it's East LA, Eagle Rock,
Mhm.
is an interesting area. Lots of small businesses, and I had a monthly meeting with whoever they wanted to send from the
Right.
small businesses in our neighborhood, and they changed a lot. And so it was really great to be able to have these conversations with people as they change. But it was also great to be able to recognize that they need things from us,
Right.
and we needed to be able to say, oh well, sure, we could do that, or we can't do that, but how about this?
Right.
And so building up and maintaining that sense of local engagement, even for a giant place like UC Berkeley, is really, really important.
When I was at the
Yeah.
University of Colorado system, town gown relations was a part of everybody's job description. And it was very clear that we needed to make sure that we were out and about and we were seen and we were volunteering and we were a part of the community in ways that would be meaningful. And I hope that that's something that's continuing.
I hope.
So I hope. This past weekend, I was at ERA, AERA, and there was quite a bit of doom and gloom. These are the education researchers. These are my people. These are my academic discipline people. And people were talking about contracts and grants that are being cut and layoffs. And to be honest, there was a lot of fear for enrollment, for their own positions, for those that are tenure track, what comes next. What would you say to faculty who are worried about what comes next in higher education?
Yeah, so I would say two things. One, on the research side, is I would remind them that there are priority changes that happen over time in any discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And what's new about this one is that it happened overnight.
True. For
And
everybody.
for everybody. And so in some ways there's a live with it kind of part that I would suggest. And so that's one. And two, I think that we really are entering a time in which we have to examine graduate education in ways that we haven't in a long time. So I think on the it's on us part of the problem, I think we have continued to produce PhDs in disciplines where there isn't really a hiring opportunity for them. And I don't think that that's fair to students. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that I think that it puts pressure on the research agencies to fund a level of research and a level of preparation that may not be world class anymore. So I think we just need to figure that out. So in the budget, we've watched and you guys have talked about PhD programs eliminating acceptances for this coming year or seriously cutting them back. I think that that's going to be a reality for some time as we go forward. And I'll add a third, which is we haven't talked about yet, is the pressure on institutions to not enroll international students,
Yes.
which is a real problem for our STEM graduate fields, where many institutions rely on not just the money, but the brain power
Right.
of international students to fuel their computer science department or their chemical engineering department. And so I think that the combination of reduced funding for master's students, reduced research funding for PhD students, and a press against international students is going to have a negative impact on the pipeline of new faculty.
Anything positive there? You told us you were an optimist.
I am an
So
optimist.
you just definitely reinforced a lot of the fears that I heard.
Yeah, I bet. As a card carrying member of AERA, I think I probably just got it by osmosis. So what do I think? I think that there will be more money available for what we used to call applied research,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's going to be useful. I think that the tenure process may be shifting a little bit toward rewarding other kinds of faculty activity.
Right.
And here is
Which I
where
think
I'm,
is going to be good for
yeah,
AERA members. Right.
yeah, which
This will
is
benefit them.
where I get to make my pitch for undergraduate teaching and learning.
Right.
One of the things we were attempting to do and take when we took over the stewardship of the Carnegie classifications was reduce the fetish about R1
Right.
and reduce this, more research, more research, more research. And I hope
Mhm.
we've done that. But I hope in parallel we have created an opportunity for institutions to really double down on their responsibility to undergraduate teaching and learning.
I think you've done that through the classifications now, but what I would say is the way that higher education thinks about mimicry and the way that it thinks about prestige, that's going to take more than just a rejiggering of the Carnegie classifications. That's going to take generations before we move beyond how we currently think.
I think that's right. And I think that hopefully we can put in place some anchors from the Carnegie. For example, lots of states now have performance-based funding models for
Right.
their state
Mhm.
institutions. if we can move some of that over to undergraduate outcomes, I think that that might help. Forget the prestige for a minute. Let's get to the real stuff about, pocketbook. And if we can change the pocketbook environment for institutions to focus more on undergraduate success, I think we will have put some teeth into it.
As we think about undergraduate, I'm going to expand the doom and gloom
Oh, good.
aperture.
Oh, good. We don't have enough.
I mean, I'm Irish. At some point, yeah, you have to dive into it. But I think a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, in addition to my mother and Tressa's mother, as we talked about earlier, are planners and like the
Yeah.
cyclical and the rhythms, and so thinking about what we expect to be sort of a steep drop off potentially in the number of international students coming to the States for undergraduate education. What are we hearing about FAFSA? It
Mhm.
feels out here like that's sort of fallen off the radar a little bit, and it might be hope and it might be a willful disregard. What can our folks expect, or what should they be planning for their fall semester to look like? And then I'll give you a chance to put some optimism in if you want. Where do you think the industry is going to be in 4 years? We hear,
Great.
there's always that pivot to we're going to see a huge number of closings and we're going to see institutions on the financial brink, but where do you think we are at the end of this Trump administration?
The team that came in to do the diving save of FAFSA did more than a diving save.
Okay.
They really built the ground up infrastructure for successful distribution.
These are the College Board folks, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so, hats off to them. So far, so good. My worry isn't so much about whether the system is going to crash and
Mhm.
burn. It's a matter of when the glitches happen, which they will.
Sure.
Who's at home to help with that?
Yeah.
And so I worry a lot about the evisceration of the team at FSA and at education at ed more generally. That
Mhm.
it works while it's working, and if it doesn't, we're in deep trouble. So
Okay.
that's my worry about FAFSA. But so far, so far so good. It gives me a chance to talk about some of these broader things. I think that, and on the 4-year vision, one of the things that worries me the most is the reduction in our capacity to collect and analyze data.
Yep.
So I think that if I were to try to do one thing, it would be to put all that stuff back in place,
Mm.
because we won't know the effects of all of these changes if we can't measure them, for good and for ill.
Right.
And I think going into this period of change, willfully blinding ourselves is just a bad move. It's just
Yeah.
a bad move. But I think 4 years from now, we will actually see the accreditation is being loosened a little bit. The ability for institutions to innovate without having to go through as many hoops as they used to. I think that that's a good thing. I think it's a good sign that institutions will be able to migrate some of their teaching and learning to third-party producers that are closer to the world of work. So I'll use the University of Texas as an example. They now allow undergraduates to put up to 4 Coursera-led Google certificates into their transcript.
Hmm.
And I think that that kind of integration is going to help higher education be closer to the world of work without compromising its academic values on the rest of the curriculum. So I actually think that there may be some opening up that will be really, really helpful. I also think that last year's protests helped us come to terms with the fact that we needed to do a better job of identifying the line between free speech and discrimination. It's not going to be perfect, but I think we are a whole lot better off than we have been. And that creates the opportunity to really focus on teaching people how to have civil discourse. And
Mm.
so that's my other hope for the next 4 years, is that it's in the air now. And so if we ignore it, we've ignored a big opportunity to bring our students and faculty together to talk about what we want higher education to be like, what we want America to be like.
I do have a question for you on that. I recently had lunch with a very dear colleague who is at Witchy, and we were talking about common data sets moving forward. And I left that lunch and I slacked our team and I was saying, oh my God, this was like the week after the inauguration. Oh my God, I don't think I had been thinking about what happens to common data sets in the way that I should have been thinking about what the future of common data sets might be. And
If I had $1 for every time
I talk about
I
Richie,
worry about common data sets, man.
I worry about common data. I think about common data sets probably every day, but now I worry about them every day. And this is my new rally cry, like, what happens to common data sets? Because the longitudinal ability for us to assess this is kind of freaking me out a little bit. Should I be worried about this?
The states will save us.
Do you think?
I
All of
do.
the states?
I do.
Ted, you think all of the states? We have 50 and Puerto Rico in territories? You think
Okay, so you can never say all. I haven't had a chance to praise our colleagues who are in red states. But look, I think the red states have been ahead of all of these discussions. And we could take all of the discussions we've had, and we could rewind them 4 years in the state of Idaho,
Mm.
and they could say, well, yeah, so we know how to manage all of this. And I do say to some of my blue state friends, really, you need to talk to people in red states about navigating this, building from it, finding opportunities, because they have been living this reality for some time.
Yeah.
So I am encouraged by the growth of longitudinal state data sets in unlikely places.
great, good.
Texas, Virginia, California is going to come on board. But I think that more and more, as states become concerned with their talent development work and their economic development, they will be making commitments to data. But then the word, right, that you used that I ignored is common.
Yes.
That's my worry.
In creating interoperability among those data sets is going to be complicated and politically really a problem.
Okay. So I think we've gone through our questions that we sent you, and I want to end on a high note. I like to say that I'm energized when I step foot onto a campus. And based on the examples that you gave and reading your nonverbals when you were talking about campuses, that's when you were energized in our conversation. So tell us about what you're seeing on campuses that gives you renewed optimism for the future of higher education.
Yeah, that's an easy one. I think that we have been trapped, and it's been a political trap. It's been a media trap. We have been trapped thinking about higher education through the lens of 10 celebrity institutions.
Mm.
And that's unfair to them,
Yes.
and it's unfair to the rest of American higher education. You're absolutely right that if you go to a college campus today, you will find a wide variety of students pursuing
Yes.
their dreams with faculty who are behind them. I go to college campuses and I don't recognize the narrative that we're hearing.
I agree.
And so I think the more we can, and this gets back to the, bring people to campus, show them what you're doing. If you have this image of a campus that's on fire and it's not where students live.
I agree.
Yeah.
So let's focus on student learning, student success, and then the rest will sort of take care of itself as long as we can focus on that.
Excellent.
I'm so glad you said that. I was with the president yesterday with some members of the esteemed trade press. And the one thing he asked them after he thanked them for their work was to remember that there are places like his institution, which is dual mission, open access, primarily commuter. There aren't protests because his students are working, are raising their families, are caring for family members, and getting their degrees. They offer programs taught entirely in Spanish because they are in a heavily Latino and Hispanic area
Yeah.
to meet local workforce needs.
Right.
These are the places that are doing the work day in and day out while everybody has a heart attack about Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Stanford and et cetera, et cetera.
I agree.
I had an hour-long interview with a reporter 2 days ago. This was about research cuts. So I was talking, I gave the Southern University story and all of these stories. And literally this person's follow-up question was, do you think Harvard is going to have to change its cash flow policy?
Sweet, sweet Lord.
And I don't know. I don't care.
But let's go back to where the education is happening. Most students are being educated on a regional comprehensive campus or a community college.
That's right.
I have been on a scholarship committee for a number of years, and we just had our celebration recently. And if you look at the profile of the students, they're the same amazing students over the last 15 years that we've always had. The same amazing students are coming through our campuses. The same campuses are doing the amazing work that they've been doing. And we need to keep telling people about that work.
When we started the Carnegie classification system, we really didn't know how it was going to turn out.
Yeah.
And we really didn't know whether we were going to see student success on the rise. 479 institutions are high access and high earnings, and they're from everywhere.
Yes.
They're from red states and blue states and rural and urban and big universities and small colleges, one tribal college. As we say, higher ed builds America. And it is
Yes.
as true today as it was 30 years ago.
Nick is going to be very disappointed that it took you 45
I
minutes
know. I know.
to
I
get
know.
that in there.
I know.
Well, Ted, we have taken up a ton of your time, and I'm sure the world has changed 4 times in the last 45 minutes.
I hope not. I
And
hope not.
thank you so much for having this very
So
candid
listen,
conversation
thank
with
you
us.
guys. I always love talking with you in private or in public. So I adore you. So thanks.
You're very kind.
Thank you.
All right. Be well.
That was a conversation that was equal parts heartening and confirming of some of our larger anxieties, yeah?
Yes. I always love talking with Ted because I love how open he is. I love how honest he is. And he isn't someone to sugarcoat what's going on, but there is an optimism to how he talks about the industry that reminds me of how I think about higher education. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say that I am often skeptical is the wrong word. Maybe defensive is the right word when people talk about, higher ed brought this on themselves and higher ed needs to this and that and the other. But his approach to accepting what is very real about the critiques
Hmm.
of higher ed
Yes.
doesn't feel performative to me and doesn't feel like lip service, which
No, I
I think
agree.
a lot of leaders who go, "Oh, yes, yes, we must be." It doesn't hit me well. And Ted, I think, is very sincere in his approach to that challenge.
And I think it's because he's reflected on it, right? As he said, he's an AERA member. So he's thinking about this through, I think, an education lens. He's not just looking to scapegoat communicators. Instead, he's reflecting on how did we get here? And I think where you and I push back is when people are looking for who should we blame for how we got here rather than looking for how did we get here and what is
Yeah.
the solution.
And
And
how do we
that's
fix
where
the optics?
right. And you and I really get angry when it's whose fault is it? But we're not going to learn from it. We're just going to move on.
Yeah,
And instead, he's saying, okay, how do we make this better? And
right.
he's done, you can tell, quite a bit of soul searching on behalf of higher education to say, how can he and his position at ACE help make this better?
Sure, and it tracks with his time in the Obama administration.
Hmm.
That administration's approach to policy around higher education was very much focused on a lot of these things that he talked about: transparency, student success, those kinds of things. So it's not surprising. He comes by it honestly, to be sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I liked how he was talking about the campuses that he's visiting. He's
Mhm.
not just going to the biggest and those with the biggest names and
Right.
brands, but he's going across the country. I'm sure it's to those who are asking him, but he's not just prioritizing the ones who are paying the highest dues to ACE.
Right.
And I think that's incredibly important.
Yes. And I think it's we didn't get to plug it while he was on, but it is a reminder that for those who pay dues to ACE, this is a membership association and they exist to
Mhm.
serve their members. So, if you need somebody to have a come to Jesus conversation with your board or your
Yes.
faculty, reach out to ACE. Ted, I know, travels a ton. Government relations folks travel a ton. There's a lot that ACE can provide locally to you to help make your job a little bit easier as well.
And as we say all of the time, this is why you pay your dues. These are advocacy organizations. They talk on behalf of the industry and they represent you. So make sure that you are taking advantage of all of the ways in which they can provide services and resources and information to your campuses. And reach out and ask. And you never know. They can always say no, or they can provide you with another option.
Mhm.
But ask.
And indeed, that is how you and I met,
That is exactly how we met. And here we are.
because you wouldn't stop calling me.
and asking. And that is how I met Ted. That is how Ted came onto the podcast, because God bless him, he responded to my email.
Things happen when people respond to Teresa Parrot emails.
Woohoo! So if I'm in your email box, everybody, please open it. Please respond.
Yeah. So this is not our last episode of the season.
You and I still talk in semesters. We, in our day-to-day life, we
Yes.
still talk in semesters.
Yes.
And I always will.
Here in early first term of the summer session, we will come back together in a couple of weeks to close out the season. It may just be 35 minutes of the two of us saying WTF to one another, depending on how the world changes by then.
Me with an exclamation point and you
with
rolling
two
your
middle
eyes.
fingers.
Yeah.
But before we wrap this episode up, I want to make sure that we take a moment to thank someone who,
ooh, yes. This is what I wanted to do too.
yes, is behind the scenes for our listeners, but is very much in front of the scenes for us.
Yes.
Our dear friend, Nicole, who is the producer of this podcast. This is her last podcast that she will be producing for us, because she is going on to follow her dreams, which weirdly involve law school
and nonprofits
and to do other things. And we are devastated for us, but absolutely thrilled for her.
And Nicole Reed, 2 E's. You should follow her on LinkedIn. She is such a beautiful writer, and she is able to summarize life and leadership, and she has such a great way of just being a great storyteller. And I highly encourage you to get to know her. She has been a fantastic friend and resource and colleague to me. So she has been great on Slack if I'm having a great day or just need an ear. So thank you, Nicole, for everything.
Yes.
And with that, thank you for listening. We'll be back for one more this season.
Yes.
And we appreciate you. And thank you to Ted Mitchell.
And thank you to you, Teresa Parrot.
And thank you to you, Erin Hennessy. And let's go get some allergy meds.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. You can find links in the show notes to the topics and articles referenced, as well as a copy of the show's transcript on the Volt website, voltedu.com. Remember that you can always contact us with feedback, questions, or guest suggestions at trustedvoices@tvpcommunications.com. Be sure to follow Trusted Voices where you get your podcasts, and we invite you to check out Higher Voltage, another podcast on the Volt Network that is hosted by our friend, Kevin Tyler. Kevin explores the evolution of higher education that is happening right before our very eyes. Until next time, thanks to Erin Hennessy, DJ Housechild, Aaron Stern, Nicole Reed, and the Volt team for a great episode, and thank you for listening.